Hey guys, welcome to Game Reviews. Game Reviews is a series in which I take games I have personally completed or have a big enough understanding of in order to relay my personal opinions onto you guys. This is purely subjective. Any game that I cover is going to be my personal thoughts and opinions with very little outside resource. The only outside resources that I use are maybe like wikis to maybe research a topic or even just to get a better understanding of what something could be in a game. Or if there's some development notes that I decide are more significant, then I would share them with you, and obviously I would put in the research into that game. Now the first game I'm going to be talking about is a game called Xenoblade Chronicles X. Xenoblade Chronicles X was developed by Monolith Soft, the same people who decided to make Xenoblade Chronicles, Xenogears, Xenowars, and now more recently Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It was published by Nintendo on December 4th, 2015. This game was published on December 4th, 2015. This game is a JRPG. I want to say that it is a JRPG. It has some MMO elements, but those elements are something I'm not going to get into in this video, mainly because this video would be 1,000 years long if I decided to talk about every single aspect in this game. For this game, I'm going to specifically be focusing on the game design concept. So, for example, the UIs, the maps, the world itself, the characters, and maybe even some outside art like the box art or some concept art that the game has decided to release. One thing that this game prides itself on is how massive the world is. The world, Mira, is way bigger than any world that we have ever seen before. It's bigger than The Witcher 3's world by a whopping 10 times the size. See, on this box art, you see this right here? Yeah, see, like behind this dude and these people in this title? Yeah, see this? You can go there. Right off the gate, once you start the game, you're gonna notice the title sequence is nothing. It's just Xenoblade Chronicles X. Now, this already kind of invokes a feel of loneliness that you might feel throughout the whole story. I felt this personally throughout the whole story, and I thought this was a focal point of how the human race was kind of alone. But I'll get into that in a second. The game starts off with dialogue in a cutscene that shows the human world being caught in an alien war, and only a select few groups of people have managed to escape it using these ships. Unfortunately, as some of these ships were escaping the atmosphere, one ship that you were on crashed on a planet called Mira, as we mentioned before. Once this cutscene is over, you start off in character customization. Now, I love character customization, and Xenoblade Chronicles X does character customization super well. You can change things like your eye color, your hair color, your eye type, your hair type, your gender, your body type. You can change even your voice, so you can have a voice that is like Shulk's previous voice actor, Adam Howden, or Fiora's previous voice actor, which is Carnea Reeves. After you create your character, you're going to run to the first protagonist alongside yourself that you meet, Elma. Elma is one of the people who was very much involved into this project that allowed the humans to escape from Earth and crash land on the planet Mira. Elma finds you in a pod and tells you, come on, let's go back to HQ. And then you're like, okay. And then you get to experience your first bit of actual gameplay that the game gives you instead of, keeping your controls and letting you watch cutscenes. As soon as you start playing, you realize that there are a lot of enemies near you, and this will be your first taste of combat. If you have never played Xenoblade Chronicles before, then this combat will be very new. The game fights with auto attacks, and you have different attacks that you can activate. These are called arts, and they are very powerful attacks under certain conditions. For example, there is a red art called Backslash. This art has increased damage if you're on the back of the enemy. There is a reason why I specify what color this art is. There's a combo and response mechanic in this game where you get into a fight, and there is a quote that the characters will shout. These quotes will have colors corresponding to what colors to use in order to have enhanced secondary effects. These colors can include purple for ether, yellow for range attack, red for your basic physical attack, and there's green, which I kind of forgot what green was. I personally didn't use green on my build of the character. Now, the game is really easy to pick up. Even if you've never played Xenoblade Chronicles before, I'm pretty sure that the developers wanted people to assume that you didn't have to play Xenoblade Chronicles in order to play Xenoblade Chronicles X. They're two completely separate games, which I really do enjoy. That they don't kind of shoehorn in story elements from the previous game into this game and expect players to understand what's going on. And there are multiple ups that this game has. The combat is straightforward, the UI is nice, clean, and simple. The use of the gamepad is really clever by allowing the player to use that as a map. And then you realize that On foot, you're not going to get into a whole lot of places in Mirror. Of course, you can go to a lot of places by foot, but it's not the most efficient way of getting from place to place. Now, of course, there are also teleports, which are kind of the quick way to get to place, but that doesn't really offer a sense of super fast travel when, you know, you're in the one of the subsections, Noctilum, and you have to go all the way to Sylvalum, which is all the way across the map. One way that the game remedies this is by creating a Skell. Skells are super powerful mechs that you can use to move around at ridiculous speeds, do massive amounts of damage to any enemy, and it's super useful. It opens up the game world a lot more than what you would originally see if you were just on foot for the whole game, and you unlock the Skells as early as Chapter 8. There's an entire side quest that you have to do, so it feels really rewarding when you get your first Skell. Of course, just driving everywhere is going to be problematic after a while, because then the player is going to get used to how big Mirror is and how fast the Skell will go, and will feel like that this Skell isn't really as mobile as it could have been. However, the game really remedies this by adding a flight module later in the game, which you can also work for, and that just makes the world so much bigger. You can go anywhere, you can go from point A to point B really fast, you can fly all around the world, and it just makes for really convenient and simple travel. Now, this game is really, really good. It's great. It's fantastic. But that doesn't make it perfect. There are many design problems that this game suffers from in order for it to be more challenging in the eyes of the player, although this kind of makes it a little bit cumbersome when put into practice instead of being kept in theory. One of the game's way to give you story elements is through chapters. These chapters have prerequisites, so you don't just immediately jump into every chapter. The level says that you are required to be level 1. This is a problem because it's not scaled to the difficulty that the player needs to be. It's scaled to the difficulty that the player thinks they'll be okay at, but then the difficulty of those particular monsters in that level are level 40, maybe even 50 by chapter 12. I personally ran into this problem where I was about level 35 and then the game threw me the chapter 12. I had the similar problem where the game threw me into chapter 12 and I was expecting, you know, enemies around my level, which was about level 35 at the time. But these enemies were level 40, even 45, sometimes as high as 50. And this created some massive difficulty spikes. 5 levels is a massive overtaking to bear. Especially with how slow you level up in this game, this is a primary problem in which the player gives a false sense of security saying that this is a level that I think I'll be okay at, but instead the level is a lot worse than it really should be. Alongside this, the game has a massive difficulty spike somewhere between the middle and towards the end. Now, I will be spoiling Xenoblade Chronicles X from this point on. If you want to skip this part and just hear my final thoughts, go ahead and skip to the timestamp that I'll put in the middle of the screen. The final boss of this game is ridiculously powerful, and there are 2 phases to this fight. The first one allows you to use Skells, making it slightly easier. However, the second phase of the boss fight drains your Skells fuels, making them unusable. This would be a great boss fight if not for the fact that they expect you to do grinding in order to make this boss fight easier for yourself. What's even worse is that there's no halfway point, so if you die, you have to go all the way back to your life save point, making you do the whole fight over again. After you beat the boss, the story unfolds to reveal the human bodies and the data for them has been destroyed, and the people who are currently living there are confused as to why they are still alive. It is also revealed that Elma is an alien that helped the human race escape, but was confused as to why all the Miosomes are still functional. The game doesn't explicitly state this and left players confused by the end of the story, or at least me. By the end of the game, I kind of felt burnt out from the story. Honestly, the story was really good until it kind of hit a snag, and then it kind of went down from there. It doesn't help that the developers kind of forced a sequel and kind of just didn't deliver on it. The game would have been so much better if they decided to give level requirements for you to unlock the story. However, this may lead to some more annoying grinding, but it would remedy the problem where the player just would feel stuck and wouldn't be able to progress because their levels are too low. Now, I could talk a lot more about this game. There's a whole map feature that the game does really well. There's an online function that this game doesn't do so great in. But in order to keep this video short, I'm not going to go into that. And maybe I'll talk about it at a later time. This game is a fantastic RPG, and I recommend this game to anyone who's willing to play Xenoblade Chronicles, or if you haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles 2 yet, I would recommend jumping into Xenoblade Chronicles X, just to get a feel of how the combat system works. Arguably, they are different, but they still feel similar enough to where you can get a full idea of how it works. Another thing that I didn't touch upon is the characters and the world itself. These are both fantastic, and I think they deserve to be praised. However, the level requirements for the story just don't make any sense. Sometimes the game can get really on the grindy side. The side quests are kind of boring if you already have all the stuff that you are required to have for that side quest. This game receives a 7 out of 10. Is this game worth it? Definitely. But just be prepared for that awful spike that happens at the end of any good game that is just related to any difficulty whatsoever.